Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. This is Helene from Triangle Veg Fest Expos, the Plant Based Network, and Virtual Veg Fest. And we are live today with Ren Hurst. But first, let's talk about how you can subscribe to our YouTube channel on Virtual Veg Fest so you can watch all our videos. We have them all up there afterwards. And you can go to virtualvegfest.com to shop our vendors and to also watch our videos there. Now, during our talk, if you could interact with us, ask questions, and find out more about who Ren Hurst is, because I've been fortunate enough to have Ren stay in my house for a whole long weekend, which was absolutely amazing because I got to know her probably more than anyone else that weekend. And so did the people who were in the house too, because we stayed up pretty much all night talking one evening. Yes, it was really cool because she came out to North Carolina for a couple of times. One, she came out for Asheville Vegan Fest, which is where I met her. I went into the restaurant Plant and I saw that she was sitting at the bar eating dinner. And I said, "Oh, that's the woman who is at the talk today." So I went over and introduced myself and took her card. And from there, Daniel Turbert asked if there was somebody who could come and speak at the Refuge Gala, Puma Farm Animal Refuge. And I said, "Hey, I've got Ren Hurst's card." So Ren Hurst came out and she was a keynote speaker at the Refuge Gala. It's like 3 years ago now. So I just absolutely adored this woman. And it maybe what she has to say can be somewhat controversial. She's not unknown to get some hate mail, but that's okay because we're going to dive right in. And Ren's going to tell you about herself right now.
Thanks, Helene. There's a lot to say or not that much at all. But first and foremost, I'm a social entrepreneur. So my entire life is about how to create positive social change. And through the work I do with animals, it's become really clear that that has to happen through an embodied presence in the world and what we carry forth through our example rather than, what we're talking about, what we're trying to take action on, et cetera, et cetera. But in the past, I was a professional horse trainer for 20 years, very successful in that career and as a holistic hoof care specialist. And I had a radical shift in awareness, thought, concept, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it a spiritual awakening. But the point is I took a radical turn away from a life of exploiting animals, growing up in Texas, being a professional in that industry, and gave it all up to walk away and create sanctuary for the animals in my care and take everything I know about exploitation, turn it upside down, flip it in reverse, and help teach others how to have a truly non-exploitative relationship to those in their care, not just for the benefit of the animals, but as a way to undomesticate our own lives and free ourselves from our own habitual conditioning based on the domesticated nature of what it is to be a human in today's society. And so that's what my work really revolves around now. And I have the same animals in my care now that I did when I was a professional, and we had to start over with nothing. And so we live very simply off the grid in the middle of nowhere in far northern California. And I've had to slowly, piece by piece, start putting a life together that can support us. And we're finally getting to a place where we can do that. But yeah.
That's really cool. So one of the things that we talked about before we went live was the fact I said, "So how are things? How are things out there? Have you had any impact with what's going on in the world?" And what's interesting is that you haven't had any impact. You tell people hey, where you live and what it's like.
I mean, we've certainly been impacted, but not to the degree that most people have. And so where I live, it's very sparsely populated. We're one of the largest counties in California and also one of the least, if not the least populated. And so there's a lot more wilderness around us than there is community. And for the most part, while everyone here is hugely affected by the virus, we've only had, I think we've got 6 cases total that have all recovered. And it depends on where you're at, but out as rural as we are, life goes on. These are people that work really hard and are outside most of their day, and they can't let this affect, things too much because they're kind of the foundation of how this community runs. But when you go into town, sure, everybody's wearing masks and social distancing and things have been closed and they're starting to sort of loosen those guidelines. But for the most part, me personally And this has to do a lot with my work and what it is that I actually do. I haven't been personally affected much at all in any sort of negative way, which is a blessing. And I definitely have empathy for everyone who is not experiencing that. That's for sure.
Yeah. So when you were here, I'll give a little story. So one of my dogs, Ladybug, she, when we pull out the harness, runs away. And I
Yeah.
brought this up. We brought this up while you were here. She literally like you, and she wants to go out. She wants to go on the walk, but the harness comes out and she just scoots and gone. So you advised, and you advised this with a lot of people, if let the animals come to you. Don't force the harness on her, but let her come to you. So you said crouch down and focus on you, like eyes shut even, and just concentrate and be there and let her come. And I did it, and it works because that's what I do.
Imagine that.
I know, right? And then like the harness is on, and then she's all excited to go out. And I was like, it's like really, really interesting because it's I don't feel like I'm forcing something on her to say like, oh, let's go for this walk. She's a lunatic on the walk. She's like a little hyena, and you'll probably get upset with all that, but that's okay. But just the fact that I could get her to just come over naturally, and I still do this. Sometimes I'm just like, I gotta go, come on. But for the most part, I know to take the breath and focus on me and not on her, and she just comes. So I really would love for you to talk about that with everybody because
Sure.
people don't realize how big a deal it is. I was also doing something cute I thought was cute when I would feed her, and it was when I think I have 3 dogs now and 3 different dogs except for Lady. But when I would feed her, I would have her jump up and give me a kiss on my cheek and then put the food down. And
Mhm.
you were like you're like, "Why does the dog have to do something to get fed? Like, why? Why can't she just be fed? Why did animals have to do tricks to do stuff?" And since our talk, and this is, I don't know, it's 3 years, 4 years, I don't even know what it is. Since then, things have completely changed, not completely changed because, it's hard, but changed in the sense that like they don't have to do tricks for stuff. I mean, if they sit, I just want them to sit so that they don't like attack me when I'm giving them something, which is just like what you'd require of children as well, right?
Not everybody.
I know that, but you would hope, like, some decorum whatsoever
Oh,
of your
that's
child.
not what I mean. That's not what I meant. I
Oh,
meant,
okay, go ahead.
there is a lack of understanding about the power dynamic between guardians and their dependents in the terms of what is needed to be an embodied leader rather than somebody who manipulates, coerces, forces, bribes, whatever, in order to get the results they want. And it has to do with the level of the emotional maturity of the guardian. And there's very little happening in especially the animal loving community around that conversation, which leads to an enormous forms of exploitation within the home that go unrecognized and unseen. And when that's actually the core of what needs to be addressed in the vegan movement overall. And so this idea that we need to do something in order to receive something is very transactional in nature and has nothing to do with love.
Keep going.
Where do you want to talk about the energy relationship and how being quiet within actually makes you more attractive to the dogs when you want to put a harness on them?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So below the surface of everything that we're communicating out here, verbally, body language, whatever, there's an energetic conversation that animals are very attuned to. And when I say animals, I mean human animals as well. The problem is most human animals are far too conditioned and removed from the feelings inside their body in a really subtle way on a momentary basis to have that conversation. Our conversation ultimately lives in our head more often than not, but that's not the way we're designed. We're designed to live emotionally aware in our bodies the same way animals are. In fact, most animals are more emotionally intelligent than we are, even if they're domesticated, because they live so much more fully in their bodies. And so when we have an agenda towards them, like putting on a harness, because we have decided that they need to wear a harness to do the thing that we want them to do for whatever reason we've come up with for why that needs to happen. Energetically, that actually feels like physical pressure on them. And so when I'm in the future thinking, I need to get this harness on you, it feels yucky. So they move away from it. When we withdraw that agenda, suddenly we feel inviting again. And they do love us. We have a relationship with them. So when we remove that agenda, it suddenly feels better. Where I learned all of this was being a horse whisperer and, day in and day out, manipulating energy to get horses to do what I wanted them to do. And so now I've just taken all of that skill set I developed and reversed it in service to animals. And I'm only an expert on working with animals this way because I was an expert in abusing them this way. So I've just tried to, this is how I atone for my sins.
So going backwards to your being a horse whisperer, can you share more about what that was like and your steps towards getting to where you are now? Because I know it wasn't easy. This wasn't an easy. This was probably one of the most incredibly difficult transitions a person could make in their lives. I know it. So I mean, share more about that with everyone, because that really gives people insight into you.
I think the difficulty has been the fallout rather than the decision. The decision wasn't even a choice. It's like once you see certain things, you can't unsee them. You can't go backwards. And so I just started out as a horse trainer, from Texas, traditional training. I rodeoed. I trained that kind of style. Then as the natural horsemanship movement came about and these quote unquote more gentler methods were the thing to do, I moved into that because that was the thing. And I always wanted to be on the forefront of whatever was the latest method that was most successful, because I wanted to be successful in my career. And so whatever was new and intriguing and scientifically supported and, making the most sense, I wanted to be at the cutting edge of that. And so that's what I did, is every time something new or better arrived in that field, I jumped on it and I went and got trained and I implemented it and I put it in my practice. And so I was always on the leading edge of horse training mentality. And then eventually that took me to join a school called Nevzorov Haute Ecole out of Russia. And that was a reality shattering paradigm of horsemanship, where you saw the horses as equals in a way that no other methodology spoke to. There was zero training, there was zero abuse of power, there was no control or coercion. It was all about respect in a true sense and earning every ounce of relationship without any means of influencing them. And it basically ruined my career. So I had to stop everything I was doing. And the more I got to love these animals in such a truly unconditional way, but in a very sophisticated way, it wasn't coming from an idea of, oh, this is wrong or this is bad to do. It was like, wow, these animals are capable of relating to us and understanding us at levels we don't even understand is possible. And it was that convinced me it wasn't a moral obligation in any sort at all. But step into integrity with all of that. That's why I became vegan. That's why I wrote my first book. And that's why I walked away from the horse industry. Now, the fallout from that was huge because I had 13 horses in my care. So if I hadn't had 13 horses in my care, it still would have been hard, but it wouldn't have been that big a deal. I could have just went and got a job, and started over. But when you have a ton of animals in your care, because I didn't just have the horses, I have 3 pot-bellied pigs, I've got dogs, I've got cats, and I never stopped caring for them. And we basically lost everything. And so I had to start over from absolute scratch with all of these dependents in my care, which is no small feat. And so it's taken some work. It's been some really difficult years, especially, I got thrown into the vegan community in a way that most vegans are not really aware of where I'm coming from, because I really came from the relationship side of things, not the eating side of things. And the relationship side of things is so much more complex than this community understands. And there's still so much exploitation going on within the vegan community that they are unaware of in terms of emotional enmeshment and abuses of power within the relationship dynamics at home that are actually keeping people from being as effective as they could be in their goals. And so that's the work I do now, is trying to help people untangle that quite a bit and get that cleaned up and make sure that you're fully in integrity with the message you want to promote in your own sphere before you go out and try to influence others too much.
Does anybody who's watching, so our people watching, if you have any questions for Ren, you have any comments, please feel free to share them. Also, you can let us know where you're from, whatever you need to do, because we don't normally have Ren at our fingertips like this, because she's a very, very busy woman. And I'm super excited to have her here today. So let's go into your first book, because I know you're working on the second. So
Mm-hmm.
tell people about the first book, and up to you whether you want to delve into the human side, or we'll leave that for we'll go into that after we talk about the animal side, because I know the next book leans more into the human side, right?
It opens up that conversation, but it just takes it into an area that is way more confronting for people than horses, which is dogs. And so I take people along my personal journey with applying this work I do now with dogs, and how that further shattered my reality beyond comprehension. And then how it gets you to a place where you see the relevance of this in every facet of life. And it is completely life altering. There's no going back, which is why so many people are confronted by my work and are afraid of it. But there are quite a few people practicing it with me on a weekly basis now, and that's been really exciting. My student base makes up about 20 countries at this point. That's how we've been able to survive. I teach the work online every week, and that's how we've been able to, just get through. But the first book is really my personal journey with horses and how I came to these conclusions. And it kind of ends there with what's possible, but doesn't give people the practical application of what this is. And so the new book that will be done at some point this year, for sure. It's got the body of work that developed as a result of the first book and the experiences from the first book that gives you the how-to manual of what it is I'm talking about, how to put it into practical application in your daily life, differences between applying it to a guardian-dependent situation versus an equal relationship dynamic, and how you can apply it in every relationship you're in, whether that's with others or situations or whatever you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. It's pretty powerful stuff.
Can you give an example? Because I know a lot of people will probably listen to this and it a lot of it could just go whoosh, right? Because you look, hi, like we have somebody, Deborah actually runs a sanctuary here in Eastern North Carolina called Blueberry. I have much
Cool.
experience with pigs with CAFOs. We have a sweet boy who wants to love everyone but fears men. What would be your advice for us as guardians? Two of them are men.
There's so no end to that. It's a very open-ended question. You know, I the complexity of this work is pretty vast. And so what I try to do is teach, there's basically 13 principles that I teach people, and the body of work is called Sanctuary 13. And when you apply all 13 principles together, you step into a truly unconditional source of love instead of a lot of the codependency and emotional exploitation and domestication as a whole that we are so used to with animals. Because I think where a lot of people don't understand is that domestication in and of itself is exploitation. It is basically controlling someone else in order to benefit from them. And we do that in ways that culturally we have called love forever. So, I mean, that could look like, using treats to manipulate behavior. It could look like baby talking because we don't see them as who they are when we speak down to them that way. And so there's all sorts of little things that we shift and change in this body of work to start becoming really aware of the conditioning that is present in our relationship to these animals, rather than basing it on the feel goods of, oh, well, this feels good to me, so this must be loving. When what we really need to do is dissect further what the nature of the motivation is in every single interaction, to discover what it is we're doing that's causing the behavior that makes animals difficult to work with, and then leads to this need for training that wouldn't exist if we were not domesticating the ones in our care. And understand, when I say domestication, I'm not speaking to biology, I'm speaking to the nature of the relationship we have with them. And so in the case of pigs that fear men, there could be a lot of things going on there, but it's not going to be a simple answer. I'd have to know so much more about the entirety of that unique situation in order to figure out, okay, well, what is occurring that could be creating a situation where there's clearly trauma present that is not being addressed. And so when I speak to trauma, I mean, there's clearly an interruption in the emotional processes of the pigs that have them going back to a fearful state or around men. Who knows what caused that? It doesn't really matter. But what does matter is how much they are able to learn how to become emotionally mature themselves in those situations. And so when those situations come up where they're fearful of men, number one is to not react to it in any sort of way that would, reinforce the idea that there's a reason to be afraid. The men in question are going to have to be really willing to show up and be fully present for the pigs when the pigs display any sort of fear for them. And so they're going to need to change their energy in that moment to become an inviting, calm, safe source of care. To try to answer that in a black and white way here today is probably not going to happen. But if you do want to explore it more, I definitely encourage you and invite you to reach out to me, and we can have as much conversation around it as you want. But, for the students that have been taking my classes on a weekly, this is big stuff. It's like an onion that has like an unending amount of layers. This is getting down to the very nature of our own domestication, where somebody brought us into the world, slapped a name on us, and decided who we were supposed to be, and had all sorts of expectations that then we project onto the animals in our care, completely unknowingly most of the time, from a real desire to be loving and to be loved in return. And so in a lot of ways, we're cleaning all of that up and creating wholeness from relating to animals in ways that completely remove all of the unnecessary abuses of power that come from enmeshing with a dependent in your care. Which book is recommended? Would love to reach out. Writing on the powers of others is great if you're a horse person, or if you just kind of want to know where a lot of this comes from. It's not going to be very necessary once this new book comes out, unless you're a horse person. Because the new book, when I look back and read Writing on the Power of Others now, it's like, Aline, when you and I met, Writing on the Power of Others had only been out like a year, maybe. Things have changed so much. I've gone so much deeper with this work. When I look at Writing on the Power of Others, I'm like, that's cute. You barely scratched the surface, talking to myself. Right. And we're so much further than that at this point. And so the new book is not finished. I'm doing the best I can to get it done as quickly as possible. But if you want a book to read right now that's been out for a long time, check out Kinship with All Life by J. Allen Boon. He was a Hollywood producer that took care of a real famous Hollywood dog in the 50s. And he discovered a lot of the elements to what I'm speaking to. Now, granted, he didn't have the extensive scientific background or the animal training background that I have to put all these pieces together. But what he discovered on his own is incredibly powerful, and it could help anyone, honestly. Just learning how to relate to animals in a way that doesn't diminish them or reduce them, or use them for our own emotional support, because dependents in your care are not there to support you. It's actually the other way around. And a lot of people have that backwards because they don't see the fullness of the harm that it causes. And that's what my work gets into, is it really starts to look at, okay, what's the consequence of relating to animals in a domesticated way? And the truth is, it's not nearly as harmful for the animals as it is for you and you reaching your potential as a human being. And that's tougher work. Hey, Lauren.
Oh, how nice. She's been a student of yours for over a year now. And I say the more I've learned to take care of myself, the less I want to turn to my two dogs to make me feel okay so they can be more themselves. And I can. That's awesome. Thank you, Lauren. That's
Yeah, so nice to see you.
that's really
Spell your
cool.
name.
Yeah,
See
right.
you in class on
Right.
Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us. That, I was gonna so I have, because I supported your Kickstarter, I think I have a
Mhm.
30-minute call with you. I don't know, is it a 30-minute, 60-minute? What is it?
I don't know, whatever you want.
I know what I can do, because I can, FaceTime you, text message you. I don't have to do I have you at my fingertips if I want to contact you and say hi. I would like to donate that to Deborah so she can
Oh,
use
cool.
that to talk with you and get
Yeah.
more value out of it. That, now that she's shown interest, I think that would be really cool. And she's a newer sanctuary in North Carolina. So Deborah, I will uh, hook you up with however that works, since we don't remember what it is, but that
Mhm.
way you can get some time with Ren one on one, a video chat with her one on one, that you can, talk with her about what's going on with the pigs and maybe the other animals that are on this at the sanctuary. So that'd be really
I
neat.
can sweeten that a little bit more. I have so much going on right now, and it all kind of, I mean, priority number one is I have a whole bunch of animals of my own to take care of. So that's like the main thing that we have to do here every day. Then it's like, okay, finish the book. But it's like at some point in between those two things, Ren has to earn money to feed the animals so that she can write the book. And so I'm living completely off the grid in this teeny tiny little shack, which is kind of awesome in some ways, but it'd be nice to have a real kitchen and a bathroom. And at the same time, there is a whole lot happening right now. There is a project I'm working on that cannot happen until the book finishes, but I'm going to relaunch New World Sanctuary Foundation, which is something I rushed into after I wrote Writing on the Power of Others and before my paradigm around sanctuary had changed. I mean, sanctuary means something very different to me today than it did back then. And what New World Sanctuary Foundation is going to be in the future is a free access of people like you, Deborah, who want to learn this work, who are in leadership positions within the animal advocacy movement, whether that's maybe you manage a sanctuary, maybe you're an animal care manager at a sanctuary, maybe you manage a rescue, but it has to be somebody that's in a position of influence and power within the organization. I'm going to coach you guys for free in this work and try to create a subtle revolution in how we run sanctuary so that we can remove exploitation out of those equations and start really changing things from the inside out, because I don't believe that we can make a whole lot of change on this planet until we become healthy, whole, emotionally mature human beings. That's the only way that we're going to be able to influence from our experience rather than, more conditioning that we're carrying around in our heads that clearly is not solving the biggest problems in our situation right now.
That's amazing. I'm so excited because we spoke about that, because I was willing to help you with the sanctuary side. I love how you've
Mm-hmm.
evolved that to be something that can support everybody in a different way than just supporting animals, right?
Yeah.
Because the thought initially was, you have all these animals, I should have a sanctuary and be a
Yeah.
nonprofit. And I know that I offered to be on your board and I
Mm-hmm.
mean, whatever you needed. I mean, hook, line, and sinker after you stayed here for the weekend. I was like, whatever I can do, which is my MO with people that I like anyway. So that's really neat, because I know you've also, if Deborah, I think you might know everyone at Farm of the Free, because Ren, you've been to Farm of the Free, right?
Yeah, and Carmen comes to class every week, and yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I
So
served on their board for about a year, and then I had a pretty radical shift again around how I perceive sanctuary as an industry and as a business, and how that is often very much in the way of what I believe is really needed to move this movement forward from the inside out.
That's incredible. I'm so excited. And now, Deborah, because you are here, you can be a part of that. That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And then so we talked, that was a perfect timing for that question because we were talking about the relationship with animals and you got to have an actual example from a question. And then for people, well, couple of things. I know that you, one of the friends that had that conversation with you until like 3 in the morning that was here, got really, really disgruntled because we talked about cats and
I'm sure.
we that was fun, and it went into brunch the next day, and
Hmm.
which is I think at another table which I wasn't part of, which I was glad that I had to be part of the conversation a second time, but I mean the baby talk. I mean we tend to look at our companion animals as our kids, right? They're not our kids, but
I think we
we
should stop looking at kids that way too.
right? So that was part of that conversation that night. But I mean, it's one thing to like get people upset about even having companion animals as pets in their lives, right?
Hmm.
It's another thing when we start talking about humans and our relationships. Because I know for you personally, your relationship has taught you so much. I mean, you've grown
Hmm.
from a relationship that just kind of happened to you. It really just kind of happened. And you just grew,
Kind of.
I mean, it was like, oh, she's cool. Let's get married.
You develop pretty strong intuitions with this work.
Yes.
So,
Exactly. So let's talk about like the applying this to our human relationships. Let's
yeah.
give people a little taste of that because that'll be more so like when the new book comes out. That will be, I mean, it should be on all your shelves, right? Oh, here's Kayla. I mean, and we got a couple of things now. Um,
Hi, Kayla.
Hi, Kayla. Yes, I know. Say Full Circle. Also, you've been to Full Circle, which is really cool. And then, oh, look at this! I opened my door today, and there was a 12-foot wide beach ball. Okay, that's awesome. All right.
Awesome.
Yeah. Right. So it's not uncommon to get kind of spammed when doing these. At least it wasn't dirty. Okay.
Hey, well, I welcome the dirty. Bring it on.
Let's not encourage. So, all right. So let's go into, the human relationships. I mean, that should be
Mhm.
quite interesting for people because it will probably blow like if you want to do it, if you want to put the work in.
I mean, it's the hardest place to take this work. I mean, people don't even want to do this work with animals because it's so confronting. But at least when you're practicing unconditional love with an animal, especially a dependent animal, there's no judgment. There's no other ego that you've got to come up face to face with. You do come face to face with the animal's trauma, but that trauma doesn't turn into rage. Well, I guess it can, but you know how to protect yourself with a raging, dog versus your most intimate partner whose childhood trauma has been brought to the surface and is out of control. And all of a sudden, you're being asked to be more than you might know how to be in that situation in order to not continue to spark that fire into conflict and to hurt. And we have a very domesticated society. We have a very traumatized society. And what's interesting about this work is the deeper you go into it, the more you see that privilege can be some of the biggest trauma a lot of people are carrying. They think, oh no, I had this great childhood. I grew up with money, blah, 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 blah. That in and of itself can further disconnect people from their most authentic self and the trauma that we're all carrying as a nature of a wound that is so much older than any of us can possibly remember, that I believe originates with our original domestication of others. And so that's what this new book goes into, is kind of looking at, when did domestication occur? What is the nature of domestication, and how does domestication further separate us, not only from each other, but from a constantly connected source of feeling in relationship, direct relationship to all life around us. And so I don't speak a whole lot about how to apply this to human relationships in the book, because I don't think that that is an easy place to start if you have animals in your life. If you have animals in your life, you pretty much have to start there and with yourself, because otherwise, if you're trying to apply, you know, moving away from codependency with other humans while you're still engaged in codependency with your dependent animals in your care, you're going to fail every day, because you're practicing one thing and trying to show up for it differently in another, when it's so easy to abuse that power with animals. And so that's the first place we try to help people clean it up, so that then they develop some sort of foundation and base for taking it where it's really hard, where your deepest wounds are going to get triggered. Your dog is not triggering your deepest wounds, he's licking them. Your partner is going to remind you what is inside of you that makes you feel like you're never good enough, that no one will ever fully love you and accept you for who you are. And the nature of this work dives into those wounds and exposes them and lets them bleed. And then we tend to it, and we start to heal and become, you know, the human animals we were designed to be, which is just an incredible place to get in touch with in terms of learning how to walk in the world unafraid and deeply connected and able to influence from a place of embodied experience, rather than, you know, these notions of right, wrong, and what we're supposed to be doing and what we're not supposed to be doing, and letting fear drive us. And one thing that I've been so grateful for with this work in this current situation that we're in is, you know, I have students that know how to apply Sanctuary 13 to this virus situation. And therefore, they're not living in fear, and they feel empowered to make their own decisions, and they can watch the news and then decide what's true and what's not for them, and what they should continue moving towards and moving away from. And their lives aren't being dictated by the television screen. And that's been enormously rewarding, to know that they feel better in themselves because of what they've been practicing on a weekly basis.
Wow, I'd love to unpack that a little. First, let's say hi to Amy. Amy, thank
Hi,
you.
Ami.
That's pretty awesome. That she's been following you for a long time. You know, keep spreading your word. That's
Thank
thank you,
you.
Amy. Let me hide that. So, unpacking a little bit more of what you were just talking about, that is pretty incredible. You know, uh,
Hmm.
if you can share, it's humans are humans. Yeah, applying the virus, that having the sanctuaries. I'd like to hear more about what you're saying to the sanctuaries in regard to the virus, to figure out what they can apply, what they can't apply. Would that apply to people watching, or would it just apply for the sanctuaries? It sounds incredibly interesting.
It applies to everybody. So when I say sanctuary, I mean the body of work, Sanctuary 13. And so when you apply these principles to anything in your life, you find sanctuary within, and then you carry that sanctuary within out into whatever you're relating to. And you find this deep stillness inside that is 100% always available to every single one of us, the same way it lives so vibrantly in wild animals. And, you know, we'd have to unpack every word I say, just about just what does wild really mean. Just because an animal is biologically wild doesn't mean they're wild. And there's so many areas that would have to be, you know, kind of looked at to have a full understanding of all of this. But there is an inherent interconnectedness that exists between all life on this planet. We all know that conceptually. This work helps you know it internally and through experience, in a way that, yeah, your ego's there. Hi, ego. I get to be this character in this body doing this thing. And that's great, and that's relevant, and it's important, and there's nothing wrong with that. But ultimately, I'm far more identified with that connectedness that we're all a part of. And so it's learning how to have a both and conversation rather than an either or. There's no spiritual bypassing in my work. We learn how to feel everything and process it the way that we're designed to. And that's ultimately what it's about, is becoming emotionally mature. So through that emotional maturity, we have access to deeper wisdom, like instinct and intuition and inspiration, which are really the driving forces of a healthy whole human life, instead of conceptual knowledge and information tracking.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, it was a little bit of a delay. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I I can sit and listen to you for hours. I did. I so I mean, so I kind of it's hard for me to say like where to go and what else to talk about because one we want to leave people to actually it's absolutely impossible for us to talk about in depth what you do in 40 minutes.
Yeah, that's why I haven't finished the book yet. I'm like,
Right?
I'm in this work. I'm a practitioner myself, and it keeps taking me deeper and deeper and deeper. And the one thing that has not changed are the actual fundamental principles and what they mean at the basic level. And so that's what the book really is. It's an intro. And then by introducing yourself to this and beginning to practice it, your own intuition starts growing and becoming the guiding factor. You don't listen to me. I don't teach you what to do. I just teach you what not to do so that spirit can guide you and that you can restore connection to your soul that's been trying to communicate with you the whole time you've been alive, but you're too busy eating cookies or petting dogs or baby talking or whatever it is to listen. And so we remove all of that and replace it with a really authentic, healthy relationship between a guardian and a dependent. And the whole idea here is to foster and cultivate a human generation that no longer desires to create permanent captive dependency in others, because the desire to create that is not coming from a healthy place. There's not a wild animal on this planet that wants a puppy to play with. And don't even start talking to me about gorillas in cages that like to pet cats and puppies, because that's not their fault. And so, we are designed to know that we are so fundamentally connected in a way that just eliminates the desire to need some sort of emotional support from something outside of ourselves. That's not what emotion is. Emotion is information. It's designed to let us know how it is we're relating to the world and what direction to move in response to that. And instead, we've become a society that is seeking out the emotion we, enjoy, are comfortable with, desire, whatever, and avoid everything else. And that's the nature of trauma. And so this has become a very trauma informed body of work that is, I don't know, it's just, to me, I can't think of doing anything else, not that I could if I wanted to. And it's moved me further and further and further away from my focus on animals. And in no way has that lessened my responsibility towards the 30 something that are in my care. My day still revolves around them, but my focus isn't on, needing to rescue anybody else anymore.
And one thing I want everyone to know, because this is one of the
Hi,
questions.
Petra.
Oh, hi, Patrick.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. And one of the things I really want people to know, because this came up in our conversation, is that you're not saying don't take care of the medical needs. Don't protect from danger of the animals in your care,
Yeah,
right? You're
absolutely not.
because I think people can get confused of, well, just let them be. Well, yes, but not
No,
to like where they'll get sick or they don't need help or if they put themselves in danger that you don't intervene in that sense.
it's a little more complicated than that. You take care of them because they're your dependents. 100% you take care of them. You meet their needs. They are a priority, but you stop using them to feel good, period. And that's what most people are doing. I mean, the definition of pet is an animal kept for pleasure or entertainment. That's the height of exploitation. The nature of domestication is exploitation. And I'm not coming from this from a place of, oh, exploitation is bad or wrong. I'm coming from from a place of, if you exploit, you will never be in touch with the conversation your soul is trying to have with you on a daily basis.
And the other thing that I feel is important, and I wanted to bring it up when we were talking about the pigs with Deb, is that the
Mm-hmm.
men when they go and they try to be their true selves, right? And they in that situation, is to not have treats in their hands when they're trying
Yeah,
to do
yeah.
that. because that doesn't
Yeah.
do it. The animals are going to come for
Mhm.
treats, but you want the animals to come to you because they want to come to you, not because
Well,
they're
let's talk
trying.
about treats for a minute.
Okay.
So, if we just look honestly at what treats are used for, and when we're saying treats here, we're talking about giving this in order to get whatever response it is we're after, even if it's to make an animal feel safe or whatever. How many healthy relationships do any of you have in your life where somebody has to give you something in order for you to want to be in a relationship to them? I know for me, if somebody was always trying to bribe me into relationship, that wouldn't be very trusting. And so these animals are incredibly adept at understanding your hidden motivations. And when we try to relate to them transactionally, that does not instill a sense of confidence in them. But more than that, we've got to look at the psychology of the power dynamic involved between a guardian and their dependent. Using food to manipulate behavior in a dependent is a really, I, I so want to be careful what words to use here, but um, food should never be a leveraging device between a guardian and their dependent. Food is a basic need. It should always be freely given with no expectations. Food is not something that we toy with in the relationship between guardian and dependent. If you need food, it's time to up your relationship game. And one of the first things that my students are taught is to get rid of treats completely. At some point, offering a treat just unconditionally can be reintroduced to the relationship once the relationship is really, really healthy. But by the time that that occurs, you don't care about treats anymore. The reason people are so attached to treats is because they know on some level that the treat is why the animal responds. And they aren't ready to face the pain that comes up as a result of seeing, oh, they want food, but not me. Because then that triggers that fundamental wound of, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. That's not true. You are. And this work helps you discover that. And, learning it in community certainly helps. We have a really supportive community of students that are absolutely there for each other in an equal capacity where abuses of power aren't involved because we're not, dependent on one another. We're all adults that can invite one another to support us and say no. And we have good boundaries. And it certainly makes it easier to know that there's other people going in this direction. But really, the difficulty of it is that you're going to have to face all of your pain. And that's why we do the things we do with animals, is so that we don't.
Right. And say Kayla said, thank you again, Ren. I know Kayla is involved with other sanctuaries now. So
Yeah.
definitely get in touch with Ren when you have a chance and see if you
Yeah.
can
Thank
work
you.
together on them.
And I'm going to make this information so widely available. There's no reason why anyone can't learn this. Yeah, I'm busy, but if people reach out to me, I'm available. And most of what I do, I am all willing to operate with under a gift economy. And so if finances are limited, it's, I make myself available and people pay what they feel like paying. And so far that's been wonderful.
Very, very cool. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments for Ren before we ask Ren how you can get in touch with her? She does have a Patreon. I am all about helping people raise the funds they need to raise, even if they're not willing to ask for it themselves or put it out there. I feel like it's important. Like I said, I've supported her Kickstarter for her second book and opened my house up to her. And that's an open invitation anytime. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. Oh, and of course, there goes the home phone. One sec. Oops, sorry, everybody. I'm one of those people who has a landline and a cell phone, and I can only turn, yeah, whatever. So, Ren, tell us how people can find you, where they can find your first book, because Casey was watching at some point. I don't know if he's still there. Casey Taft was part of this live.
Hi, Casey.
Hey, Casey, if you're still there, and where they can find your first book and how they can support you, how they can get in touch with you if they want to learn more, if they need help. Let's do it.
Yeah. First book, you can get through vegan publishers. You can get it through me. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at bookstores. It's out there. All you got to do is look for it. Second book is not ready yet. It will be as soon as I have time to finish it. But it's coming. And everything that is in the second book, I teach on a weekly basis in the classes. And how you get involved in the classes is by joining my Patreon. And it's patreon.com/rendermewild. And you just sign up at the tier that has the weekly classes. And I'm going to be changing the tiers. Basically, every week I teach a lesson on one of the principles, and they just revolve. And we just wrapped up a, a round of Sanctuary 13 last week. And so this past yesterday was the first principle again. And if you are at that tier that has the weekly classes, you have access to every one of the recordings. It's just archived on Patreon. I'm probably going to change up Patreon a little bit after we get through this next round and make it a little bit more accessible to people. But I have a pretty full plate, so we're just trying to do the best we can. But the feedback from my patrons helps tremendously in figuring out, how we shift and move around that. That's pretty much the only way to access the information right now, is either through Patreon or the first book. And the first book yes, it leads you in the right direction for sure. It speaks to the fundamental concept behind this, but we're a lot further along at that point than where I finished off with that book. Until I finish the book, Patreon's probably the best way. I have a Facebook and an Instagram. I'm not active on either right now while I'm trying to finish writing and dealing with everything else that I'm dealing with animal care. But I have another project in the works right now that was unexpected, but is actually going really well. The area that I live in is just inundated with this catastrophic stray dog situation because we are pretty far out and there's a whole lot of, I wouldn't say legal marijuana cultivation, and it's turned into just an enormous influx of German Shepherd type and pit bull type dogs being dumped, being not taken care of, whatever. They show up at our property all the time, and I adopted one last year, but I can't take anymore. And so I was catching them and taking them to the shelter, and then COVID happened and the shelter wasn't taking any dogs. So now I'm fostering dogs, and one at a time. And what it has turned into is this incredibly beautiful opportunity to introduce the locals to my work in a way that they would never be interested in usually. So it's been a beautiful thing. And if it continues to go well, I'm going to start training practitioners of Sanctuary 13 to be fosters and how to implement this work with the dogs, so that then the dogs become an embodied example of the effectiveness of this. And so then that starts the conversations in our local communities, and people start catching on to a topic they wouldn't necessarily want to have a conversation around if we were just talking about undomestication and rewilding and such. So
That's incredible. In each moment, you bring up something else you're doing.
I'm not trying to do this much, I promise.
Well, you think
If it were up to me, I'd be in the woods.
right, and
and
if
yeah,
things come to you, one, because probably you're meant to do them, and this
maybe
is
so.
definitely something else that is right up your alley. And you get to spread your word, and the animals, I'm sure, are benefiting immensely from it.
Well, and I'm also taking this into the human realm now. I'm a court-appointed special advocate for at-risk youth now, and I'm working with foster kids and applying this work to them. And it's just incredible. We have a real chance here to, create a generation that is not at the mercy of the trauma of previous conditioning, and but we each have to, really become trauma informed in relationship to our own selves before we can share a whole lot to others.
I would love to follow up with you after you've been doing that for like a year and see
Mm,
how it's impacted the foster kids, because
yeah.
that's a group of people that life has not been easy.
Mm,
Trusting adults is not easy because adults have not done right by them.
yeah.
So I'd love to see what impact you have. And I mean, it would be absolutely um, an incredible thing to follow up on in a year to see what happens. as you live it with them, right?
Yeah, well, and I don't know what the future looks like at all anymore. I very much live in a moment to moment basis, and I move towards what I'm inspired to move towards. And that's become the greatest gift. And it's also really scary. I mean, like I said, I'm deep in this work myself, and I'm just learning how to really trust it at some of these really much deeper levels. But I have a very different vision for sanctuary than I ever did before. And I really believe that animal sanctuaries, especially, have got to start becoming human focused and let the animals just be cared for unconditionally in the background while we focus on healing the problem instead of treating the symptoms. And so, I have 80 acres out here. It is a sanctuary, but I've kind of just sat here wondering, okay, what does this look like? What do we need to create here? And more I'm feeling drawn to, look at what if I created like a wilderness based transitional living program for kids aging out of the system. And if we could address that trauma right out the gate and then send them out into the world with the gifts of their, resilience from what they've had to overcome at such a young age. The sensitivity and the hyper awareness that's developed in a lot of these kids is almost like superpowers when they're cultivated and allowed to emotionally mature in a safe environment with adults that aren't trying to use them or manipulate them or have expectations with them. And so I don't know, there's a lot of exciting things that are kind of bubbling up around here, but on a day-to-day basis, it's feed the horses, pick up the poop, feel your body, breathe, just survive another day.
Yes, one day at a time. That's my
Mm-hmm.
mantra right now, as we talked about, one day at a time, because we don't know. We have no idea. At no point in life, in our history, in our lives, has it been more important to do one day at a time, and we do not know what tomorrow or the next day will bring, or 3 months will bring. And it is not in our lifetime has that ever been. We do not know what the fall will look like.
No,
We
and
have
it's
no
it's a real gift. That's what it means to be wild, and the faster we can catch up to that internally, the less, of a challenge it'll be. And if we learn how to just relate to, the moment we're in and what our body is trying to inform us when we don't shut it up with unimaginable forms of distraction.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Ren. I mean,
Yeah, you're so
I'm
welcome.
I'm really glad that you took the time to talk with us today. And the fact is that I sent her a text like a week ago, I think it was, and we just figured out a date that this could work. And she was like, "Okay." And then she was like, "Well, I'm really busy today, so I only have this time." So I was like,
Yeah, I was technically in a call when this started, and I just kind of like put it over there and let them think
"Right."
that I was still there.
Yeah, she has an avatar working for her. She has doubled herself. It's her human self and her avatar self. And both were working today while we were talking. So for everyone else, thank you. We are back again on Saturday at 4 p.m. with Dr. Shayla Toombs Withers. She is out of Tennessee to talk about your health during a pandemic. You can ask a lot of questions for her. And of course, we are set up to do this on next week on Thursday. We've got Corinne Sutton at 4 o'clock. And then on Friday at 3 p.m., we have a half hour with Dr. Greger. So please join us for that. Like our YouTube channel for Virtual Veg Fest. Follow us, go shopping. Virtual Veg Fest is open. We might get Ren's book on that. Forgot to ask you about that prior. But for everyone else, have a wonderful Thursday and be safe and stay home and don't forget to wear a mask. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you guys.